So let me guess, you're holding altcoins just like me, you're waiting for the altcoin season just like me. We've been told for about a year now that an altcoin season is just around the corner, just like me. So we're going to take a look at some key charts that you have to understand as to why we haven't seen an altcoin season yet and whether or not we are going to see one. So if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and let's talk about altcoins. So first and foremost, if we look at the altcoin season index, well, obviously we are nowhere near an altcoin season. What we've seen over the last month or so is this altcoin season index go from a Bitcoin season to in between a Bitcoin season and an altcoin season, peaking at roughly 59, which was very similar to where the previous rally in January ended. And we are going back down right now. Now, what has happened since this, rally, this newfound hope on Ethereum and altcoins? We have had the FOMC meeting just over the last few days. On July 30th, the Fed, Jerome Powell, the chair of the Fed, basically came out and said, you know what, guys, we're not going to do anything to rates and we're not going to stop quantitative tightening. Now, this is what analysts were predicting. So there wasn't a whole lot of news there. And if you take a look at some of the minutes that came out here, we can see here that it says the committee decided to maintain the target range for the federal fund rates at 4.25% to 4.5%. And on top of that, another very key line here is this one here. It says the committee will continue reducing its holdings of treasury securities and agency debt and agency mortgage-backed securities. This is basically them saying that they're continuing quantitative tightening. So we've had, another FOMC meeting where people and some people always call for rate cuts, but of course it was in line with analysts yet again. But what really shaped up the market here is that Fed Powell actually said that they haven't made a decision for September rate cuts. And if we take a look at the predictions right now for the September meeting that we're going to have, whether or not the Fed is going to cut rates, well, as we can see, there's now about 60% of analysts thinking that the Fed is yet again going to pause rates in September. And if we just look at our Discord, we had posted this just before the Fed announcement. This is in our VIP Discord. It's the first link in the description below if you want to stay up to date with the markets. But as we said, there was a 97% chance of the July meeting being a no change in rates, but we were looking at September and we were seeing that analysts were predicting at a 60% chance that the Fed was going to cut rates in September. But as you can see now, we have 60% that the Fed is not going to cut rates. And that is what people are currently digesting. That is what the current market is digesting. And as a result of the reasoning behind this is because the economy is actually doing quite well in the States. We do have high rates in the States, but we're essentially hitting all-time highs in the stock market. We're hitting all-time highs on Bitcoin. So does the Fed really need to cut rates? That's really the question that the Fed is asking itself, as well as they have said they're going to wait for more data before putting on a more decisive stance on what happens in September. So that's what's currently happening on a macro scale. But if we pivot into altcoins and Ethereum, first and foremost, we are at a very similar spot where we were just a few days ago. Ethereum is still finding resistance around this 3,860. We've been here time and time again, and we've, basically kept everybody up to date that this is key levels of resistance for ETH. You can see it on the weekly chart. There has been time and time again where ETH hasn't been able to pass this level. Now, in my opinion, it is eventually going to pass it. Whether or not it's in a week, a month, or 2 months, or even more, nobody really knows, but I am of the opinion that we are eventually going to see this resistance break. And once that resistance breaks, well, that is really where we're going to start seeing ETH perform better and alts are going to follow suit. Now, what we can take a look at in the meantime is number one, Bitcoin dominance. If you look at Bitcoin dominance, we called this out perfectly. We found support on the 50-week moving average, which is this blue line here, found support on previous levels of support for Bitcoin dominance. And right now, Bitcoin dominance is at 61.6%. So essentially, as Bitcoin dominance goes up, your altcoins are going to come down. And that is just, evident because Bitcoin continues to gain dominance on the market. And we are at key levels of support. And again, that was very evident from the previous move we saw in December, January. And we were calling this out in our Discord ever since we saw this move start. This was Bitcoin dominance back in mid-July. We can see, we had to hit 66%. It was coming back down. We were saying that this 61% level was going to be some support. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we have. So if you're not in a Discord and you want to join that Discord, well, you know where to go. It's the first link in the description below. And you are going to be able to stay up to date with the markets because we've been calling this out since basically when Bitcoin has reached 66%. And we have been looking at what history has been able to show us. Now, that was one chart we've been monitoring, but this one here also gives us a very good opinion as to where we currently are in the markets. This is a total 3 minus the stablecoin USDT divided by Bitcoin to look at how altcoins are doing in relation to Bitcoin. And if you look at what has happened every time we get into June, July, we do have a local low. So we had one this year in 2025. Where are we finding resistance? It is on this 50-week moving average. We again have seen this time and time again over the last few years. It was in that November to January, altcoin mini season that we had where we broke it, weren't able to find support on it, and we went all the way back down. If you go to June of 2024, you have another local low, and then, altcoins do well for a few weeks. If you go to 2023, you have another local low in June. If we go to June of 2022, well, you have another local low and another rip into the months of July. So that is something that we've continued to see over the last few years. And now if you look at this relationship, well, we haven't necessarily bottomed out where we've bottomed out in 2019. So that remains a possible scenario, which essentially means that if this is the case, altcoins could continue bleeding a little longer. And especially now with the Fed not too keen on cutting rates in September, well, that whole thing could just drag on a few more months. And again, everyone's saying, well, now the altcoin season is going to start in, later Q4 or later into Q1 2026. But again, nobody really knows. And that's why you have to continue looking at these charts on, a daily, weekly basis to understand, okay, well, what is the market currently saying? And of course, for altcoins, it's saying that there is likely a little bit more bleeding to happen. Because if you look at the same relationship, so altcoins, but this time versus Ethereum, you can see that ever since the peak here in April, where obviously altcoins were getting crushed, Ethereum was getting crushed, we've seen one thing happen and one thing only happen. This chart going down indicates that ETH is gaining dominance on altcoins, and that is why your altcoins are not doing as well as ETH. So what we want to see for altcoins to do well is we want to see this go up. And we saw this relationship go up in June of 2024 all the way to April of 2025. Altcoins were actually doing a lot better than Ethereum because if you remember the narrative back then, it was ETH is dead, Solana's the next thing. And nobody wanted to touch ETH when it was at, 1500. But as we can see now, the whole narrative has switched. Everybody wants ETH and nobody wants altcoins. And that is exactly what happens time and time again. Because if we look at the 2021 altcoin season, well, of course, you had very similar things happen here. You have everybody wanting ETH right over here as this relationship is going down. And then everybody wanting altcoins when this is going up because people are rotating from capital, from Ethereum, all the way into altcoins. So that is another reason why we are seeing what we're seeing right now for altcoins. And the best bet right now is to just hold ETH. Now, if you look at another relationship, and I'm going to show you ETH versus Bitcoin, we've seen this one time and time again, and it's the exact same thing again. So if we take a look at ETH Bitcoin, yes, it's bottomed out. And again, this is Ethereum only. We've just seen altcoins are bleeding against Bitcoin, but ETH is going up against Bitcoin, which is why why all the money is currently, into ETH. But ETH hasn't really broken out of its key resistance levels. Now, the good thing here on this relationship is on the weekly chart, we're seeing that this blue line, which is the 50-week moving average, is acting as support over the last week. And ever since, this relationship has continued to go down for the last few years, we've seen this blue line act as resistance, and now it has turned into support. So it was resistance back here, and now we're kind of finding support on it, and hopefully it continues going up, which is again that second phase of the altcoin season, because it starts with Bitcoin, goes to Ethereum. That's where we currently are. But everybody wants altcoins when Ethereum goes up. And that is why altcoins are continuing to get wrecked, because they're getting wrecked against Ethereum and they're getting wrecked against Bitcoin. But that's not to say that you can't make money on altcoins, because yes, on some days, the market's going to rally and you're going to see coins do 100, 200%. And the small caps are even going to do more than that. But you have to be paying attention that this is likely not the bigger move just yet. And we're going to see Ethereum break out before we see the bigger move on the other alts. Now, of course, it's all about risk to reward ratio. If you want to invest now, or if you want to wait for the breakout, that is entirely up to you. And that is why you have to be understanding of the crypto markets as it comes. And you shouldn't be listening to someone that's, calling for an altcoin season every other day, or that, someone that is saying that this coin is going to do 100x. That is something that you need to do your own research on. And of course, crypto is risky, so don't invest money that you can't afford to lose. Now, the last chart I'm going to show you is ETH dominance. Of course, we've seen this one go up as well. We have the 50-week moving average again acting as support, but we are nowhere near the top. And again, we are still in this phase 2 where Ethereum is slowly but surely starting to be more relevant in the space as public companies are buying it for their public treasuries. We have Ethereum inflows continuing to pour in, and every time we have a little bit of bad news in the markets, such as what just happened with the Fed, well, altcoins die, ETH kind of stays stable, Bitcoin staying relatively stable, and you are, just like me, holding altcoins, questioning the whole thing, because we've been in altcoins for years now, just waiting for them to go, and people are losing patience. But in my personal opinion, I do believe that it's only a matter of time, but that time, like I said, can be weeks, can be months, and nobody really knows when it's going to be. The only thing we can do is to continue looking at the markets and participate in the markets, because time in the markets is better than time out of the markets. Now, to wrap things up, as people are digesting what's happening, what the Fed said, the market's going down, well, people are again getting scared, and this is the perfect opportunity to continue looking at strong coins that you want to hold, because we are back in the neutral sentiment for crypto. And just over the last few days, Bitcoin was 120,000 and people were greedy, people wanted more, and now people are getting back into the neutral phase. But if you look at Bitcoin, it's pretty funny to look at it on, a year chart. If you go on to the chart for Bitcoin and you look at it on a year chart, I mean, sure, we're dipping. Yeah, we went from 123,000 to 115,000. But are you really seeing a massive dip in this? It's kind of crazy. You zoom out even more, we're just, on an exponential climb for Bitcoin. But you're looking at it on a daily basis, yes, it's dipping, but on the macro scale, it is still in a bullish uptrend. We're still in a bull market for Bitcoin, and it's only a matter of time before we see the same thing happen to Ethereum. And then after, we're going to see altcoins, and we're really going to see that altcoin season that everybody is surely waiting for. So last but not least, if you look at Bitcoin's chart to understand where everything is, well, we are definitely in a channel for Bitcoin. We have resistance at the top here. Every time we get close to these levels, it bounces right back down, and we have we have some support down here. So what we're seeing right now for Bitcoin is up, down, up, down, up, down. And that is, every time we get down here, we have support. Every time we go up here, we have resistance. And we've seen this time and time again. If you go back to, this line here, or this, from May all the way to June, just over the last few months, we saw the exact same thing with this channel. And if you go back to even, months and months ago, you saw a massive downtrend for Bitcoin right over here, where it lasted basically 6 months from March 2024 all the way to the end of September 2024. You saw a channel right over here where nothing was happening for Bitcoin until it really broke out. And once it broke out, it went to new highs and everybody was happy about this. But as you can see, we were doing the exact same thing back here, just waiting for, some bullishness on Bitcoin to send it to new highs. And I am still very, very much so bullish on Bitcoin. So we're going to keep an eye on that. And as I said, even though it's not altcoin season, there's still plenty of ways to make money in the space. Whether or not you're spotting different narratives at different times, as the market rallies, you catch the dips, you buy, you trade on perps, whatever the case may be. What I've been doing is looking at smaller cap coins, some on the base ecosystem, some in the AI space. All of that research is being posted in our Discord, and we are capitalizing on some of these plays, even as the market in the general sense for altcoins isn't doing a whole lot. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I still believe firmly that there is going to be an altcoin season. Is it delayed now by a couple months? Is it delayed by a couple weeks? I don't know, and nobody does know, and that is why we're going to keep you guys up to date as data becomes available. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Peace.